A lot of people ask me, why did you create Soul Alchemy? And the answer to that is, I created Soul Alchemy because I want to be able to empower others. I want people to understand that no matter where they are in their life, no matter what their life is like, where they came from, or what they're dealing with, that they do have the power to change it. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. My soul used to wear 16 masks. I've been there. My life was a mess because of negative repeating patterns that I created through past life choices and perpetuated through present life choices. I just repeated the energy of those choices every day in my day-to-day life. These are the masks that I wore, masks that I no longer wear, thanks to the new choices that Soul Alchemy taught me how to make. I wore a mask of uncertainty. I knew I was supposed to do something awesome with my life. I knew that I had a purpose for being here, but I didn't know what or how. And I felt like a caged animal. I wore the mask of need and desperation. I started my business with a desperate need to turn my passion for crystals and stones into something wonderful that could provide for my kids and my fur babies. Before I married my husband, I had amassed quite a large collection of beautiful crystals and stones that I began collecting as a child. And I extensively expanded this, working for a stone importer for many years from my teens onward. And when I worked for the stone importer, I worked in the retail showroom too, and I helped people identify what stones they needed to work with, because I could link them up to the energy of the stones they needed, So I had experience in that too. But all I had besides that was a fierce desire to be financially independent from my husband and any other human being on the planet. My creativity, a lust for learning, and an open mind. And my collection of crystals and stones, and a dream just to live a safe, happy life with my family. I wore the mask of victim. My husband was abusive on all levels, and I let him control every single aspect of my life for over 20 years through the choices that I made every day. My father was abusive on all levels, and when I chose to marry my husband, I kept that negative repeating pattern of abuse going in a huge way. I wore the mask of fear. Those of you who have been or are in a domestic violence situation know that the staggering layers of fear involved in those types of relationships would put the world's largest onion to shame. Every moment of my day and night was ruled by fear, and it's not a pretty way to live. It is just not living at all. I reached my breaking point when I finally realized just how afraid my kids were of what their father would do to me next, because we never ever talked about my husband's abuse and what they were willing to do to protect me. I overheard them talking one night, and I realized that they all had been sleeping with knives and baseball bats hidden under their beds and their mattresses. And they were making a pact to do whatever necessary to protect me. Now, do know that he had never been physically abusive to them, only me. I realized then and there that I wasn't the only one living a life ruled by fear. My children were too. I also realized that the next time he attacked me and they thought my life was in danger, they would do everything in their power to protect me. And I knew he would turn on them too. And it would be a horrible tragedy. I also wore the mask of dependence. You know, I thought I was doing the right thing for my kids by staying in the marriage because there was no way I could financially provide for them without my husband. Because I knew my husband would rather rot in jail than pay child support and alimony. He made that abundantly clear. And I also believed that I would spend the rest of my life living in fear of him if I left him. You know, waiting for the night that he would get drunk and decide to take revenge on me for leaving him and not caring about the collateral damage of our kids or our furry family members. I wore the mask of scarcity, obedience, and helplessness too. You know, I had to find a way to make enough money to leave him and to be able to pay the bills myself, period. He refused to go to work if I didn't work with him in his construction business. I spent all day long with him, 5 days a week, enduring him treating me in such a way, just sickly sweet. You know, so everybody around us thought he was a great husband, and I knew that I reached out to help for many of them, and none of them would believe me. I spent my evenings homeschooling our kids. I wasn't allowed to keep any of my paychecks either. He controlled them. I wore the mask of intimidation and shame. If you've been there or are there now, you know the level of control abusive people wield. He long ago alienated all my friends, and the closest family I had was 2 states away. And I was not going to force my children to give up our furry loves, Gracie and Snickerdoodle at that time, and everything that they had to run to a shelter to live. That's no way to live either. So I also wore the mask of blame and anger. During the last few months that I worked with my husband, I discovered the Law of Attraction books at the library. Now, those books taught me that we must take responsibility for our own lives and that we, in fact, do create our own reality. Now, at first, those books pissed me off. I didn't want to believe that I was responsible for my miserable life, but I was. But if I was responsible for it, then I had the power to change it for the better, period. You know, the two go hand in hand. And that was such a huge aha moment for me. And that allowed me to shed the mask of blame and anger. But the problem was that there was tons of missing information on the law of attraction. And applying what the book said seemed to be totally hit or miss. And I wouldn't understand why until years later. But it did open my mind to the possibility of freedom and gave me courage. I also wore the mask of worry. The next day, after overhearing my children's conversation, I did something that took every last smidge of courage in every fiber of my being. It was Friday, it was payday, and we were at the bank. We just cashed our paychecks. We didn't have bank accounts because he didn't allow it. That was more control. And usually when we got back in our car, he would hold his hand out and I would place my entire week's earnings in it. But this time I didn't. This time I said no. I could not even look at him as I said it. I was so terrified. But I just kept the money fisted in my hand. I was covering it with my other hand and holding it, tight to my chest. And I was just cowering in my seat. I waited for him to explode, but amazingly he didn't. He didn't say a word. He just got out of the car and walked away. I was so terrified of what would happen when he came home that night. But I'd taken the first step and there was no turning back. My paycheck was only $170, but it was enough to give me a safety net for food, for pet food, and gas money to drive us all to my mom's house 2 states away. Now, I knew I could leave in short order if it became necessary, and it was, kind of inevitable. And this gave me and my kids a bit of peace. We had a little peace of mind and courage to plan our future. Because before that, it was just day-to-day living. That was it, just surviving. Now, having done that, I had no choice but to find a way. So I went home, I told our kids what had happened, and I tried to keep myself from going into a flat-out panic. I told them to pack their most valuable possessions and hide the boxes in the back of their closets, and I went to my closet to do the same thing. I looked at all my beautiful treasures of stones and crystals, and I had them hidden away in storage containers to keep them from breaking them. It's one of his favorite things to do. And a light bulb went off. The only thing I had of value were my crystals and stones, and I sat there in that closet and I cried. My stones had given me comfort when I didn't have comfort anywhere else. But if I had to give them up to protect my family, then that's just what I had to do. My tears of sadness turned into tears of joy because I realized that this was the reason I had these beautiful treasures. To put me firmly on the path of providing a safe and joyful life for me and my family, and not stay in the lives that we were living, which was born out of and controlled by fear, but to be able to have a life born out of joy and love. I thanked my stones for the opportunity that they just showed me, and I went straight to my phone and I secretly set up an Etsy shop to sell my crystals and stones online. I did not have a camera, but fortunately my cheap little phone did. Now, as I sold a few here and there, I bought supplies to make jewelry and crafts to sell in my shop too. And y'all, the instant I took that action, something clicked. And I would look back later and realize that that feeling happens to me when my new choice opens new doors in my future. And when it's in a choice that's in alignment with who I am at soul level. And I had just shed the mask of worry. Now, I also now wore the mask of secrecy and struggle. Now, after my husband was done ranting each night and finally passed out, I would spend about 3 hours working on things for my shop. I kept it all hidden away the rest of the time in my closet, and I started my business on a cell phone that he only allowed me to have so that he could call me and keep track when I wasn't at home or he wasn't with me, which was very rare. But, he had to have that control at all times. We didn't have a home phone. We didn't have home internet. We didn't have a functioning computer because he broke the one my family gave us. So when I had an order, I printed out the packing slip and shipping labels from the library's computer when the kids and I were there once a week getting books for their homeschool. I did this for a year, putting every little penny, and y'all, it wasn't much, that I made right back into my business to help it grow. It was slow going. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have credit cards. I didn't even have a credit score. So everything for materials, to make things for my tiny little shop had to be paid for cash up front. There was no terms, no credit. But I planted the seed by shedding a few masks, by making new choices, and it was growing slowly but surely. Now, when he came home that night after I refused to give him my paycheck, he fired me. He said that I wasn't worth the money he was paying me, and I should be spending more time keeping his house cleaner, as was about the only thing I was good for. Now, it was a lot more colorful than that, and it involved flicking cigarette ashes in my face and spitting on me, but I'm not going to go into the nasty little details. I just agreed with him completely, just to try and keep shit from escalating, knowing that my kids were waiting in their rooms and listening with their weapons, Thankfully, his choice of abuse that night was verbal and mental, and he was just too drunk to get physical with me. But inside, I was absolutely rejoicing because he just given me all the freedom I needed to work on building my business full time while he was at work. Yay! I had just shed the mask of struggle. So my business plodded along in secret, making slow but steady progress, and I shed the mask of scarcity. Now, there was one night where it came to a point where I had to make a major new choice and continue to making major new choices. Everything just came to a head. I call this my night of shedding many masks. Okay, so one night his abuse of me got really bad on all levels, and I was terrified. I was afraid for my life, my kids' lives, and for our babies' lives. And I knew that if I didn't call 911, we wouldn't live to see the sunrise. Having my secret business gave me the courage to make that phone call. And when I asked that 911 operator for help, something clicked again. Because I just shed the mask of victim, helplessness, intimidation, shame, and obedience in one new choice to make that call. I'll never forget standing there bleeding with his handprints on my neck, terrified beyond anything I'd ever experienced before. And he had suddenly decided to go outside, and I was standing where I could see the front and back doors. It was all locked up, and all the windows with deck access, because we have decks across the front, part of the front and part of the back of our house. And I'm hovering over my then 13-year-old who was laying across our pet carriers, just hysterical, vowing to protect our cats with his life. And I will never forget my 17-year-old standing by the front door with a sword, ready to run his father through if he succeeded in breaking the door down. He was on the other side, repeatedly mule kicking it and screaming all the things he was going to do to me. I remember asking the 911 operator why they weren't here yet, over and over and over, and begging them to drive fast enough to at least save my kids. The 15 minutes that it took 6 sheriff's deputies to arrive was the longest 15 minutes of our lives, and it did take all 6 to get him on the ground and handcuff him when they did get here. But unbeknownst to me, I had made a huge choice that night that aligned with who I am at soul level. And I made more money in my business than in the next 4 days that I had made in the entire last year. And I knew I could actually finally pay the bills myself. I just shed my remaining mask of uncertainty, desperation, need, and fear. With my husband in jail, I was able to start spreading my wings. I started by investing in online classes to further my metaphysical education. And a little over a year after that, I found my second master teacher. She taught me how karma and the law of attraction really work, who I am at soul level, and how to access that information to empower other people. And my world totally shifted on its axis. And I chose freedom. Freedom to be me, freedom to create the lifestyle that I want for my family and myself, freedom to create an amazing business that I love with every fiber of my being, to teach and empower other people how to transform their lives and find their freedom, using my knowledge and skills. Freedom to live a life of passion and purpose. I shed those masks and took back my personal power by honoring who I am at soul level with the choices that I made, creating karmic grace and utilizing the law of attraction. And I became the hero that I needed in my life. In the first year after learning those things and applying them, I went from $17,000 a year in income to 6 figures. More importantly, my kids and I went from living a life of fear to living a life of joy, knowing that we can create exactly the life we want, and you can too. I've been serving clients one-on-one, on a one-on-one basis with tremendous success, but there are only so many hours in a day, and I want to be able to empower lots of y'all. That's why I created the Soul Alchemy series of courses for you. You can unmask your soul and become the hero you need in your life, and I can show you how.